I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's March 23rd, and we have a lot to talk about. Last week, we passed the one-year mark of the pandemic. Now, that's probably an event that no one really gave any thought to a year ago, but here we are. COVID-19 has inflicted an unspeakable toll on the world, killing over 500,000 mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, cousins, and grandparents just here in the United States. But we've also passed another milestone. We now have more than 100 million Americans already vaccinated. And continuing to put shots in arms is what's going to get us back to something close to the lives many of us probably took for granted until a year ago. One word that we've all heard a lot more frequently over the past year is resilience. We've learned that living through a lockdown can be challenging, and it's resilience that helps us get through life's challenges and recover from setbacks. And while resilience may have become a new topic of conversation for the world at large, when you're living with the uncertainty of MS, you come to realize that resilience is one of the most important tools in your personal toolbox. Joining me today to talk about building your resilience is Dr. Megan Beyer. Dr. Beyer is a rehabilitation neuropsychologist and an assistant professor of physical medicine at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, where she specializes in cognitive rehabilitation and neuropsychological assessment and intervention. But before we get to my conversation with Dr. Megan Beyer, there are a few other things that you should know about. When the COVID-19 vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer received their FDA approval, the National MS Society convened a group of experts to provide guidance for people living with MS when it came to making decisions about the safety, efficacy, and the timing of COVID-19 vaccines as they relate to MS disease-modifying therapies. The MS Society's COVID-19 Vaccine Advisory Group has continued to review advances in COVID-19 and MS research and adjust their guidance as new information surfaces and new vaccines are authorized for use. This past week, I had an opportunity to speak with Dr. Nancy Sykott. As the chair of the MS Society's National Medical Advisory Committee, Dr. Sykott also leads the work of the Society's Vaccine Advisory Group. Since the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine recently received FDA approval, I asked Dr. Sykott whether the Vaccine Advisory Group had reviewed the data from the J&J vaccine clinical trial and updated its guidance for people living with MS. Dr. Sykott told me that the Vaccine Advisory Group has updated its guidance, now advising that all 3 FDA-approved vaccines, that's the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, are considered safe for people living with MS. The updated guidance goes on to point out that there is no preferred vaccine for people living with MS, and that people living with MS, whether they're on a disease-modifying therapy or not, should take the vaccine that's in front of them when one is offered. Dr. Sykott emphasized that all 3 vaccines are safe to use while you're on a disease-modifying therapy, and that people who are taking Kesimpta, Lemtrada, or Ocrevus might want to talk with their neurologist or MS specialist about the timing of their disease-modifying therapy with respect to the timing of their COVID-19 vaccination. To review the advisory group's guidance in detail and to learn more about COVID-19 and MS, you can visit the MS Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/COVID-19, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. While we're on the subject of COVID-19 and its impact on people living with MS, the MS Society has dedicated a page on their website to the various studies looking at how the pandemic has impacted people with MS. It's never been easier to participate in research studies because, in most cases, you can participate from the comfort and safety of your home. Researchers are recruiting people living with MS who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 and those who haven't been diagnosed with COVID-19. So I hope you'll choose to be part of this tremendous scientific effort to more fully understand the different aspects of the pandemic and their effect on people with MS. You'll find a link to this page of the Society's website in today's show notes, and I hope you'll take a minute to check it out and sign up to participate. Last week, the FDA gave its approval to ponesimod, an oral disease-modifying therapy for treating relapsing remitting MS and active secondary progressive MS. Ponesimod is being marketed as Ponvory, a 20 milligram tablet that's taken once a day. Now, in a head-to-head clinical trial, Ponvory was compared to Aubagio, and this was the first time that two oral disease-modifying therapies were actually compared head-to-head. And the clinical trial results showed that treatment with Ponvory led to nearly a third fewer annual MS relapses. Ponvory is currently under review by the European Medicines Agency, and if you'd like to find out more about this new disease-modifying therapy, please visit ponvory.com and you'll find that link in today's show notes. People living with MS are often told that they need to take charge of their health, but that can be challenging. After all, living with the uncertainties of MS can sometimes feel overwhelming, and the complexities associated with MS get magnified and multiplied in underserved communities. But having support can make a difference. Taking charge of your health becomes a lot easier when you have someone in your corner backing you up. And that's one of the big reasons why the newly announced partnership between the National MS Society and PAC Health is exciting. The two organizations have announced that they're partnering to implement a patient-centered digital health coaching program for people living with MS. PAC Health is an evidence-based patient engagement platform that matches each individual with a personal health advisor who provides one-on-one support through phone calls, texts, and emails. The result is health behaviors are changed for the better, gaps in care get narrowed, and overall outcomes improve. When you work with your PAC Health advisor, you learn tangible, achievable methods to improve how you manage your MS, and you receive ongoing resources to help overcome barriers caused by the social determinants of health. That's how you take charge of your health. Try to keep in mind that Michael Jordan was one of the greatest basketball players in history, and even Michael Jordan needed a coach in order to become a champion. Working with your health advisor will make you better at living with MS. So we'll be watching the progress of this very promising partnership. Foot drop is a common symptom of MS in which a person is unable to lift the front part of their foot. It's caused by ankle weakness, usually due to faulty communication between the nerves in the brain and the foot. When you experience foot drop, you increase your chances of tripping and falling, especially on stairs. On the other hand, if you walk around hyper-aware of your foot drop, you end up raising your foot too high when you walk, and that quickly leads to muscle fatigue and can even lead to hip or back problems. So in either case, foot drop is a problem that stands in the way of mobility, and solving a problem is at the heart of entrepreneurial innovation. Pierluigi Mantovani's father lives with MS, and Pierluigi wanted to use his understanding of neurorehabilitative technology to develop a tool that could possibly help his father and people like his father, people who are living with foot drop due to neurological impairment. So fast forward our story 4 years, and Evolution Devices, the startup company that Pierluigi and his 3-person team launched back in 2017, is this year's winner of the Lifebulb and Bristol-Myers Squibb Addressing Unmet Needs in MS, an Innovation Challenge. Lifebulb is a patient empowerment platform, and they've partnered with biopharmaceutical company Bristol-Myers Squibb to support user-driven innovation. 10 finalists were selected to pitch their solutions to an independent panel of judges that included MS experts, healthcare experts, and business leaders. Evolution Devices was awarded the $25,000 first prize, which they're planning on using to further develop their functional electrical stimulation device that couples artificial intelligence and proprietary software to rehabilitate foot drop in MS. If you'd like to learn more about Evolution Devices and their EvoWalk smart stimulation technology, you'll find a link to the company's website in today's show notes. Taking a step, wondering whether your body is going to support you or trip you up, seems like a perfect metaphor for living with the uncertainty of MS. And over the past year, people living with MS have also had the additional anxiety produced by a global pandemic that's changed all of our lives. The trait that allows us to move through and past the very real challenges that life sometimes puts in our path is resilience. Joining me in a moment to talk about how people living with MS can go about building their resilience is my guest, Dr. Megan Beyer. Because of its unpredictability, an MS journey rarely resembles a straight path, and resilience is the thing that can carry you through the unexpected twists and turns that MS might bring. My guest today is a friend of the podcast, Dr. Megan Beyer, and we're talking about resilience. Dr. Beyer is a rehabilitation neuropsychologist and an assistant professor of physical medicine at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, where she specializes in cognitive rehabilitation and neuropsychological assessment and intervention. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Beyer.
Thanks so much for having me.
As the world continues to find its way through a global pandemic, a situation that's affected everyone in ways that most people have never experienced before, resilience has become a popular word. And it's a word that people who are living with MS may already have an innate understanding of. Yeah. I've heard resilience defined as how we bounce back from negative events. Is that a fair definition?
I think that is a fair definition. I might also add to it how we cope with events or situations that are persistent. And I think that's the area that people with MS really know how to manage, because MS is not a once and done thing. You don't get diagnosed and cured from it. You don't just bounce back. It's really managing those symptoms long term and recognizing when those symptoms change. How do I adapt to life again and again and again?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of what's been written about resilience is often about bouncing back from acute trauma, recovering from a specific event, for instance, maybe the loss of a loved one. But as you just pointed out, MS isn't like that. Because it's unpredictable and progressive, MS kind of presents you with chronic trauma. It's more like a series of ongoing events. So I'm wondering, is bouncing back from the kind of chronic trauma associated with MS, is that different than bouncing back from a one-off traumatic event?
I think it is, because I think that people with MS, well, it depends on the type of MS that you have, right? So if you were to have an exacerbation and then your symptoms improve back to close to or near close to baseline, you might have an episode of needing to bounce back from that acute trauma or that acute event. But I think that we all know that MS also has ongoing progression and ongoing symptoms that you have to manage every day. So I would say that I think it's also about how do I manage the grief that comes along with any losses associated with MS, and then how do I manage the day-to-day difficulties that weren't there before I was diagnosed with MS. So it's a little bit of bouncing back from those acute events, but then managing the chronic condition that comes along with having persistent symptoms.
Martin Seligman wrote that there are 3 obstacles to bouncing back. He identified personalization, pervasiveness, and permanence. Can you talk a little bit about what these obstacles are, how they get in the way of bouncing back from a negative situation, and I guess most importantly, how can someone overcome these obstacles?
Okay, yeah. So I think there's a few factors here. So personalization is taking the disease, maybe even onto yourself, maybe viewing it as something that is only impacting you or impacting you in a different way than many other people, as well as maybe even blaming yourself for progression or symptoms. So sometimes I hear people talk about that if they had eaten better, if they had taken a disease modifying medication, a different disease modifying medication, or they hadn't changed a medication, then that might have changed their disease process. And so they start to blame themselves. So that I would view that as sort of personalization. In terms of pervasiveness, it's how much does this impact my life? And there's another psychologist that I work with. Her name is Roz Kolb. I'm sure that she's been on the podcast. She's wonderful. One of the things that she talks about is MS being a puzzle piece that we fit into our lives and not being your whole life. And so I think when MS becomes somebody's whole life and not just a puzzle piece, that tends to have you have difficulty bouncing back because you're not seeing the other factors that are really positive or going well in your life, as well as permanent. So if symptoms are persistent, how do I adapt to this new life, this life that's different than the way I did things? And I think that can be really difficult, that adjustment of how am I now if I have to start using a cane or I need to start using a chair, how does my life look different? And how permanent are these symptoms? That can have a big impact on bouncing back.
A moment ago, I said that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've heard a lot about the importance of resilience, but people who are living with the uncertainty of MS were already well practiced in being resilient well before the pandemic. So are you seeing that sort of prior practice in being resilient being helpful to people with MS as they're coping during the pandemic?
I am actually. I do think that there are people who are coming in and are struggling a little bit more. But in many ways, I think that people with MS have been incredibly resilient in the pandemic. And, many of the things that have thrown other people that don't have MS through a loop have been things that are accepted or well managed at this point. So a few examples of things like that would be maybe not getting to see family members and friends as often as they used to, or seeing them in a different context, like using video, like Zoom, to do those kinds of visits. Many of the patients that I've worked with started using those kinds of technology previous because fatigue or disability made it challenging to meet with family members or get out as often as you want to. So, it certainly does not wipe away those challenges for people with MS, but I think many of the patients that I've been working with have been managing it very well.
I think most of us, when we look around at our own circle of friends, people we come in contact with, we can point to some people and think they seem to be really resilient, and others struggle more. Is a person's level of resilience somehow programmed into their DNA? Is that it, or can you actually build your resilience?
Sure. So I think that there is a piece of resilience that may be inherited. I mean, we don't really know, not, in the sense that some people just seem to have a little bit more even from childhood, but it's certainly not permanent. You can build resilience, you can learn to be more resilient, and there's many factors and strategies that you can use to be more resilient and to grow that resilience in yourself.
Can you share some tips on how to do exactly that?
Absolutely. So I think sometimes taking a step back from the situation, I'll share a few things that some of my patients are doing. So keeping something like a gratitude journal, or writing down one positive thing that I'm looking forward to today, or one positive thing that happened to me today, taking a list and writing down everything that I was able to accomplish today. So kind of by not only examining the difficult factors or the difficult things that came up each day, but also examining the positive factors and balancing those things out helps people be more resilient. It helps them not just focus on the negative or the challenging aspects of life, but it helps them see the entire picture. I think sometimes when we're going through things like the pandemic or having a diagnosis of MS, it's very easy to be pulled into the dark cave of whatever is going on around us. And if we can balance that out with positive things, I mean, this doesn't just apply to the pandemic and MS. It could be having any other medical condition. It could be going through a divorce. It could be having the loss of a loved one. If we can sort of put down our anchor, ride out the storm, see the positive, and then look for the silver lining. And if you actively practice each of those things, I think you're going to end up being more resilient.
There are things that unfortunately invade too much of our lives each and every day that make it a challenge to sometimes get past them. And I'm wondering if you would recommend doing something like watching the number of hours you might spend watching cable TV news or social media. On the one hand, social media is wonderful for connecting with friends and family members, and it's especially important during times like this. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of gloom and doom, and so much of it is based on misinformation, people getting upset about things that aren't even real. I'm just wondering, is that something that we should be watching as well?
Yeah, definitely. I have found that a number of my patients have cut back on the amount of time they're watching the news or reading news stories or going on social media. And it's surprisingly impacted in a positive way many factors. Their mood has improved, their sleep has gotten better, they're less worried and anxious. So I think it's always helpful to take a step back and not just look at the news, but what am I consuming on a day-to-day basis? Because what I'm consuming tends to be what's playing or ruminating in your mind. And so if you're starting to get into a funk, maybe take a step back and look at, what are the books I'm reading? Who are the people I'm talking to? Am I watching too much of the news? Really think about how those things are impacting you. And I'm not telling people just stop doing those things completely, but maybe think about when to do them. So if you're having trouble sleeping at night because you're watching these news stories and they're really stressing you out, maybe you watch the news in the morning for an hour and then cut it off after that, or record your favorite show and watch it and then watch something positive afterwards. But I do think that it's worth paying attention to what you're consuming. And I would say one other thing just to add on to that. I don't think that we should all be Susie Sunshine and pretend that things are okay all the time, right? I do think that it's okay to acknowledge difficult life events, as well as acknowledging the real realities of having something like MS or being a family member of somebody who has MS. And spending, maybe setting aside a little bit of time to just let yourself feel uncomfortable, to feel sad, to feel angry, or if those thoughts pop up, allow them to be there for 2 to 5 minutes, and then redirect your attention to something that's more positive, because we don't want to push them away and pretend they don't exist, but we also don't want them to consume us and take over. So if you can find a place for them that gives you an outlet, but it also makes sure that they don't take over.
I think you make a really important point that sometimes gets overlooked when we're talking about resilience. We're not necessarily saying we're going to simply allow ourselves to be distracted from things that are real that we're facing in life. And building resilience does not mean building denial.
Right. And I do think it's important to acknowledge that all of your emotions are important, not just feeling happy. So one of the first questions I usually ask when I'm working with people is, what is your goal in working with me? And if somebody were to say, I want to feel happy all the time, we would have a real conversation about that, because it's good to feel happy, but we also need to learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions or to manage uncomfortable emotions, because all of us are going to feel uncomfortable emotions, and and it's real. And we just don't want those uncomfortable emotions to drag us down. We want to be able to have them there and to serve us.
Well, Dr. Megan Beyer, thank you for all that you do to improve the quality of life for people affected by MS. And thanks for talking with me today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
And just a reminder that on March 25th, Can Do MS is hosting a Jumpstart program on bouncing back and moving forward. And on March 30th, they're offering an online coaching session on building resilience. If you're interested in learning more and registering for these programs, you'll find a link in today's show notes. That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society, and you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/186. You'll find that link in today's show notes, so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or text. And just a quick reminder that if you haven't yet taken our online listener survey, you still have time. Completing the survey will take you less than 7 minutes, but it will allow me to learn a little more about the Real Talk MS listener community, and you'll be entered into a drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card. You'll find the survey at realtalkms.com/survey. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.